How's it going? Welcome back, my wonderful wise ones, to another fantastic video, not full of confusion whatsoever, because Kojima is a goddamn mastermind. Or is he simply a gamer hipster?
Ongo Goblogian, the art collector.
Well, today we're gonna find out, because we're taking a look at Death Stranding 2, and I do hope you enjoy this Death Stranding 2 review based on the early access stuff. And yeah, let's just dive right into this crazy game. Death Stranding. Well, isn't that game that came out a couple of years ago that was basically simulating what it's like to be an Uber Eats driver? As someone who has worked for Uber Eats before, I can 100% confirm that this is indeed what it's like delivering packages. I mean, there's no end to the amount of bullshit and chaos that we have to deal with.
I'm your Uber driver. Get in.
I didn't order an Uber.
We've got one now.
I do hope you enjoy this Death Stranding 2 review, and if you are new to the channel, do consider subscribing. Become a wise one today if you love game reviews, deep analytical content around video games and philosophy. You're in the right place. It would mean a great deal to me if you do consider subscribing and joining this fantastic community. And that's what this is, boys. This is a community, so please do sound off down below in the comments. That's the whole reason I do this. That's what makes it fun. So let me know your opinions, but please try and be respectful of everyone, because, you know, funny enough, we all have different perspectives, and that's okay. The whole point of becoming a wise one is to think clear-mindedly without tribal mentality, and that is what I try and do with my game reviews as well. I will tell you, of course, if I have a personal bias towards a certain thing, and I'm going to break it down like I usually do into positives and negatives, what's good about this game, what's not good about this game, and of course tell you if it is, you know, an objective take or if it's a personal preference, and then of course you can weigh up the decision if it's worth your time or not. I think that's the best way to do it. So let's get on with the review of Death Stranding 2. Now, Death Stranding 2 is coming out on the PS5, that's where it's making its big debut, and I do think that this game will eventually get ported to the PC, and you know, because the first one did as well. But let's just start off this review of Death Stranding 2 by stating what exactly this game is for newcomers, okay? Well, like I said in the intro, this is basically a glorified Uber Eats simulator. Now, if you've played Metal Gear before, you'll know the basics of how this feels when it comes to its combat, with its shooting and its stealth gameplay. It's very much Metal Gear inspired when it comes to the third-person shooting and stuff like that, and stealth has been overhauled in this game compared to the first game, and just the combat in general is greatly overhauled. It's a viable playstyle now, and I'll discuss that later, but it's still not an action-focused game. The majority of what you will be doing in this game is going from point A to point B, delivering packages. Now, I first want to stress the fact that there's a reason why so many people are divided with this game. Some people say that it's high art and it's, you know, a masterpiece of, you know, modern gaming, while others think it's basically complete trash and it's just pretentious to the point of being ridiculous, okay? And I kind of stand somewhere in the middle, leaning a little bit more to the ridiculous side of things.
Bullshit. Bullshit.
Because when it comes to the themes and story of this game, it has many interesting creative ideas, just like the first one did, and it's building off of that, of course. The universe, the lore, it's all the same, and you really do need to play the first one to really understand what's going on, but there is a recap for new people at the beginning of the game, but it's, you know, not exactly the best. Death Stranding loves to throw you into the thick of it, so you need to understand, you know, what exactly BTs are and all of this different terminology throughout the game. So for new people, they will be rather lost. And honestly, I think that this would have made a great novel or a movie. You know, it has very many interesting ideas, but as a video game, I do think it is a little bit lost with just trying to break boundaries. And the creative director, you know, Kojima himself has already stated he didn't want to make something palatable. He didn't want to make something that a lot of people can enjoy. He wanted to make something that actually people didn't like, and only a small majority, you know, would actually get it and create a cult following that people would love over time. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that should be, you know, an after effect. It shouldn't be your main goal when creating something. That's where the pretentious kind of attitude comes from a little bit.
Derivative.
As someone who covers a lot of philosophy content on my channel and thinks deeply about narrative and storytelling in video games, the thematic undertone to them, because I think they can truly be something special compared to other media like movies or, you know, just books, because you're interacting with them. It's not a one-way simple interaction. You know, video games, you input something and an action actually happens. You know, that's the magic of a video game, is you're involved in the storytelling. It does have the opportunity to truly make you think and question, you know, deeper themes about life, you know, slave morality that Nietzsche touches on, or, you know, what it means to self-actualize and all of this kind of stuff. Some great games do manage this well while still being a fun game, like Dark Souls, for example. Death Stranding, to me, never felt that, you know, compelling. It feels a little bit all over the place. A lot of it could be translation issues. The writing itself is never that smart. A lot of the characters simply state how they are feeling, what they are thinking, and it's not really done that well or intelligently when they're communicating with one another. And a lot of it just seems to be kind of abstract and weird for the sake of being abstract and weird. But that's my own personal bias. Some people absolutely love the story, and there are nuggets of, you know, gold in here, that's for sure. So for some people it might not be an issue, but I just want to preface that if you find the first game confusing, this is going to be even more confusing. So now that the premise is out of the way, let's get into the big points of this game, the main positives and negatives of this game. So that was kind of a mixed, you know, kind of perspective, I guess, you know, my own personal bias, but just basically telling you what this game is, the themes that it deals with. You know, it's all around life, death, rebirth, and, you know, it has a lot of cool ideas, but a lot of it just doesn't make sense when you actually think about it deeply.
Bullshit.
Basically, what you need to come to understand is with Death Stranding 2, it's very much the first game just overhauled to be more palatable and better in the gameplay departments. For example, like I said, combat is much better. Graphically now, it's very stunning to look at. Textures are the biggest improvement, where, you know, the geometry on the PS5 is much greater and much more detailed, less loading screens, more open environments, stuff like that. You can do cinematic camera shots now, kind of like Red Dead Redemption 2 style. The lighting overhaul for this game looks absolutely incredible. And what I really want to stress that's changed a lot in this game that most people won't touch on, but to me it's very important. This is what makes me so attached to some older games like Jak and Daxter, and Ratchet and Clank, stuff that we just don't get to see in game development. And as someone who creates soundtracks for games, if you don't know, check out my Spotify if you're interested in some great electronic synth music that kind of blends different genres together. But as someone who thinks about this stuff a lot, and I love this in video games, if you don't know what a dynamic soundtrack is, it's pretty much when you're doing something in the game world, the soundtrack actually adapts to you. Most games don't utilize this technique anymore compared to older games, but I really love it. So when you're going off the beaten path, you know, the soundtrack, it's the same, but it will adapt. It will add new instruments. It will add a new tone. The same thing where, you know, if you pull out your weapon, the soundtrack will adapt and change and get more, you know, upbeat before the combat actually kicks in, and then it adapts again. That's super cool, and it makes you much more immersed in the experience. And the art direction of this game, that's what really pulls you in. Combat, the delivery, and the movement are all better, and they all have their own separate skill trees this time around. And basically it allows you to stat into any of that kind of playstyle. So if you want to be better in a certain area, you can now do that, which I like. It allows you to actually, you know, improve on the aspects of the game that you like. It has a more sandbox feel to it. Of course, it's still got that multiplayer element where, you know, kind of like No Man's Sky, where if you build a structure out in the world, other players can actually access that, which I really like. It adds the element of community. There's a lot more gadgets this time around, which I'll talk about more later. But basically, it is very much the first game, just it has more mechanics to it and it's much more polished, you know, with its delivery systems, with its movement, and of course with the combat. So the gameplay is still very much the same. It is still much that Uber delivery style of gameplay, but now there's a lot more combat in between. It's still not a lot to see out in the open world. And as someone who values my time a lot now, as you know, life gets busier and busier as you get older, I like games that really, you know, give me a special experience. I don't like to be just watching a long cutscene for a long time. You know, like traversing an open world but without anything going on. There's a lot of that in this game, but less than the first game. Now you can actually build monorails that connect to each other, transport, you know, delivery systems, and basically just deliver your valuables much easier once you get better at it. Or if you want to focus on combat, you can actually do that. The next big positive of Death Stranding 2 is just the amount of equipment that you have now. So you have these things called dolls, in which you chuck them, and they are literally dolls, and they basically give you information on the world around you, which is pretty cool, and it's good for stealth, you know, gameplay for people who want to spec into stealth. Also, you also have this thing called a tar cannon, which basically helps you put out fires, and you can use it on enemies as well. You have grenade launchers. Just your arsenal is bigger this time around, and not only that, but with your actual traversal in the world, you know, that's bigger as well. You know, putting down bridges, ladders, all of that kind of stuff. You know, you have much more flexibility and options. Like I said, building monorails. You even have this thing called a blood boomerang, in which you literally chuck a part of yourself at an enemy, which is kind of crazy. Also, the, you know, encounters where it kind of turns into a horror game out in the open world. There's more variation with the enemies as well. It's a little bit more kind of spooky. Now, do bear in mind that in this Death Stranding 2 review, this is all based on the early access coverage and what has actually been played so far, so do keep that in mind. There might be even bigger surprises later down the road, but I'm just giving you this early review for people who are on the fence, so you don't waste your money. But what I really like about this game compared to the first game is it kind of all felt the same after a while with the first game. This time there's greater variation in location, so you won't just be in one place, you will actually be traveling through Mexico into Australia and lots of other different locations, so I really do like that. Another big positive is they've overhauled not just, you know, enemy encounters, bosses, but also the actual level design and how it interacts with the player. So now you have like weather systems, and they aren't just background, you know, kind of graphics. They actually have gameplay elements like, you know, dust storms or electrical storms, and all of this kind of stuff that really do change up the gameplay a lot. And you have to think more tactically about, you know, what you're carrying, because you have to protect your cargo, of course. You know, that's Uber Eats 101, is don't drop the goddamn food. So of course you can't, you know, just, you know, be a messy boy. I like also now the addition that you can drop your backpack, and then, you know, focus more on combat, because, you know, what you're carrying, how much it weighs, that actually adds to, you know, that actually changes up combat. It actually changes your movement completely. And of course there's ability skill trees that, you know, cater to that kind of play style, which I really like. But a small negative I do have to say when it comes to the skill tree is none of them are super unique or interesting so far from what I've seen. You know, some of them are cool, some of the abilities you do get are pretty cool, but a lot of it just makes the gameplay less annoying. You shouldn't be unlocking abilities just to simply make gameplay less annoying. To me, that's kind of ridiculous, but that's what a lot of it is when it comes to movement, for example. But still, I do like that feature. It kind of reminds me of Outward and that whole, you know, backpack system. Another negative to follow up the upgrade system is just the writing and the story. Like I said, this is a personal bias one, I've got to be honest, and some people are going to click with it a lot more, but none of the characters really interested me. They all feel kind of soulless and dead, and you don't usually interact with many NPCs anyway, so it just ends up feeling, you know, kind of just disconnected, I would say. Honestly, Death Stranding was always a game that a lot of people were confused about. You know, Kojima said that he wanted to make a new genre of game, and that's a pretty bold statement, but what he ended up making was pretty much a third-person walking simulator with combat from Metal Gear and stealth from Metal Gear, and a story and universe that is very interesting on paper, but sometimes doesn't actually stick, the thematic landing, I would say. But this time around, there is a lot of new mechanics, new ways to play around with combat, new ways to play with stealth. So just kind of seeing this as a sandbox experience, I think that's where the game is truly fun, because going from point A to point B, there's a lot more to do and interact with now. And if you're a fan of the story originally from the first game, then you're going to, latch onto this even more. But if you've never played the first game and you're thinking this looks interesting, I would say really do your research, because you have to really understand what you're getting into. This isn't a normal game in the traditional sense, and a lot of it feels kind of bogged down. And I really don't like experiences anymore where it feels like it's not respecting my time, and that's going to vary, person to person. So I would just say, if this all sounds good to you, then that's great. But if you're a little bit unsure about some of the elements, I would say be cautious and, check out other Death Stranding 2 reviews and just do your research before jumping into this. It's not your traditional game. But there you go, that is my Death Stranding 2 early access review. I do hope you enjoyed this video and you enjoyed this Death Stranding 2 review. I'm just not completely sold on all of the ideas, but there are a lot of changes that I really do like about this game compared to the first one. But still, at the end of the day, it's not a game for me, but it doesn't mean it's a bad game. And I do like that they are, really, fine-tuning the experience of the first one. But it's not a completely new take on Death Stranding, fixing elements that I believe need to be fixed to make it a little bit more, just engaging. But that's my personal opinion. So let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Have a great day. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like and subscribe if you're new, and I'll be seeing you in the next one. Peace out.